Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca. Pleased to meet you. I'm here to talk about writing the book on Ash. And if you're not sure which book that is, because Mike didn't show it clearly, this is the book I'm talking about. This is the Ash Framework book, which I co-wrote with Zach Daniel, who is the creator of the Ash Framework. It's being published by Pragmatic Programmers, and it's currently in beta, but it will be fully released very soon. If you have bought the book already, thank you. You are now my new favorite person in the whole world. If you haven't bought it, if you scan that QR code or go to the PragProg website, you can buy the book. And if you use the code AshBookMeetup, you can get 35% off your purchase. The code will be again at the end if you miss it, so don't worry. So who am I? I'm Rebecca. I'm a long-time developer, but this is my very first Meetup talk ever, so please save any heckles until I'm done, otherwise you might make me cry. I am the co-author of the book Rails 4 in Action, which was published by Manual in 2015. I have been at Alembic for almost 5 years, Mike. In a couple of weeks, that will be my 5th year anniversary here at Alembic. I've been using Ash since mid-2022, which is when Alembic started using it. I worked on the very first project that Alembic built with Ash, so that makes us some of the really early adopters of the framework. I live in sunny Perth, Australia, where it's always hot and always sunny, which is awesome sometimes. And I am a childless cat lady. And if you think that's just an excuse for me to show photos of my cats, you are correct. These are my cats. Say hello. So why write a book? When we started working with Ash, we realized that the learning curve of the framework was huge and that the discoverability of features was really, really hard. There was a lack of larger examples of putting all the pieces together. So the initial getting started was really good. Like you could get up and running really quickly. But then as soon as you're like, okay, how do I do this? You're like, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to find out. I don't know what there is to help me with this. And building a single feature can require bits and pieces from a lot of different libraries because Ash is split up into a lot of different packages. So there's Ash Phoenix for Phoenix integration. There's Ash Postgres for Postgres integration. If you want to use something like Ash Oban or Ash State Machine, or there's lots of different Ash packages. And if you want to build a full feature, you can need a lot of them. So we thought a project-based tutorial would help people over that hump of learning what there is, learning what's available, and getting familiar with working with the framework and the ecosystem. But why me, though? When I first pitched the idea of a book, most people's first reaction was, but you don't even like Ash. And that was true. I will admit that was true. But I thought I could still do the topic justice. I have writing experience, and I've been told I'm a fairly good writer. I had time, had been the operative word, but I had time to put it together. And I thought I could do the topic justice, and I thought I could do a good job. The jury's still out on that one. So this is the project we built. We built an app called Tunes, and you can go to that URL, tunes.7ccat.net, and you can see the app that we build over the course of the book. We made a wish list of features that we wanted to discuss and introduce and get people familiar with, like resources and calculations, aggregations, authentication, all that sort of stuff. And then we sort of searched for a domain model that would, a topic for an app that would cover all of them. And this is what we landed on. It's a music website, so you can browse music and view albums and artists. None of the data is real, it's all fake, but it's fun to browse around and favorite stuff and stuff like that. So we built this app. The idea behind the book was we would provide the initial application, the Phoenix, the web part of it, because we're building a web application, and then we would build out the Ash part of it over the course of the book. So we didn't want to focus on the Phoenix part, but we wanted to show how Ash can integrate with it and build a full application. So the timeline for building the book, for writing the book. The initial idea came about in mid-2023. I had a bit of downtime between projects at work, and I'd been doing some work on the previous version of the Ash HQ website, and started to realize that there were some real gaps that couldn't be filled with like single guides on single topics. So the initial idea included the chapter outline and the sample app idea. So that's when we decided on the tunes idea and the chapter outline for the 9 chapters that we planned the book to have. So in December 2023, I had a bit more time in between Advent of Code Puzzles, and I decided to write an official proposal and submit it to Pragprog. The proposal was a warm proposal because Josh Price, our esteemed founder of Alembic, had already spoken to Sophie Di Benedetto at Pragprog, who is the series editor for Elixir, and they were open to the idea of an Ash book. So we thought it might be received well. The proposal included a 5 to 10 page writing sample. So I had to do that. It was about Christmas, New Year period. And one funny thing was I wrote the whole proposal and it lists who were the authors of the book. And I just put myself and Zach. And then I realized right before submitting it that I had not actually asked Zach if it was okay if I put his name on it. And I'm like, I just realized I might be signing him up for all this work that he might want to do. I'm like, is that okay if I do that? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, good, because having his name on the book adds a bit of gravitas to the book, a bit of credibility that it might not have if it was just my name on the book. So that got accepted, and we were super stoked that it got accepted about Christmas, New Year's 2023. So in 2024, I built the initial app, which is what you can see on the demo website. We wanted to build the whole thing up front so that then we could rip out all the Ash parts and put them back in slowly over the course of the book, and it would mostly work with a bit of tweaking along the way. The plan was to write the first half of the book between February and May 2024. I sort of based my time estimates based on my previous book, Rails 4 in Action, and how long that roughly took to write. So I thought I had a pretty good guide on how long it would take. In June, we plan to have the beta book release, finish the book by September 2024, and then by January 2025, we would have a print book release. Awesome. The process of writing was pretty straightforward. We went chapter by chapter from start to end. I was the main author of the book, so I was writing the main content. I was in close consultation with Zach about code issues to make sure that I was teaching the framework in the way that he wanted it to be understood by people. That was my primary goal with the book, to do things the way that he wanted them to be learned, to be used, to be learned. So we found many bugs. There was a lot of polish to add, and he was responsible for all of that. He was awesome. Then each chapter went through an editorial review by our assigned editor at Pragprog, which her name was Kelly. And then I addressed any issues that came out of that. Some funny ones where I found out that my writing style, first I was using way too many hyphens for sentences to separate sentences, and then she got me out of that habit. And then it was using too many commas in sentences, like just little things like that that I wasn't aware of in my writing style, but she picked up on. And then we rinse and repeat until the book is complete. Sounds like a pretty good process. And we're now past January 2025, so we have a book, right? Unfortunately not. We are now here. The beta book did get released in January of this year, only 6 months late. The book is not yet content complete. I'm halfway through the very last chapter. I'm hoping to have that wrapped up by the end of March. So what went wrong? It turns out this is going to be really obvious to a lot of people, but it was news to me that writing new content is a lot harder than revising existing content. When I wrote Rails 4 in Action, it was an upgrade to the book Rails 3 in Action. So the chapter outline, the most of the content, it was all already there. It was just revising and upgrading and tweaking, and it was still hard work, but it was a lot easier than coming up with all of that from scratch. And shorter content is harder. When we submitted the proposal, one of the questions on the form was, how long do you think this book is going to be? And I was like, I don't know, maybe 400 pages. And Sophie said, no, it's going to be 250 pages. And I went, oh no. So we ended up chopping a lot of content. We had to really shorten things down. And I'm a pretty wordy person and a pretty loquacious person, so making shorter content is a lot harder. And I don't know if you've seen Rouse 4 in action, but it's a big book because this is what happens when I don't have an editor telling me to make things short. This is about 600 pages. And life messes up the best laid plans. Life happens. I had some health issues last year. I had some personal issues going on. Work picked up again, like right after we submitted the proposal. Zach was on a conference world tour, it seems, for a lot of the year. We just didn't have the time that we thought we did, and things took a lot longer than we thought they would. And some features of Ash were not as polished as I thought they were. I often joked that you could tell which chapter of the book I was working on by following where I was filing issues on GitHub over across all of the different projects. And this led to what we call book-driven development. You never really know something until you've taught it to others. And I found this was really true. Like when we started writing the book, I think I had 3 Ash projects in production. So I thought I had a pretty good grip on the basics and the fundamentals, and I should be able to explain them pretty easily. It turns out I didn't. Sometimes you just, how do I explain this? At the start of chapter 3, we write this search functionality to be, okay, we want to search for artists by name. And I wrote the code, I wrote half of the chapter that introduced this action and these arguments and this filter. And Zach, and I was happy with it. It's code that looked a lot like code I'd written before. And Zach took one look at it and gone, why have you done that? You don't need to write that like that. There's these other ways that are so much better. And I'm like, do I even know anything? Like, what's been going on? Like, why don't I know this? How can I teach other people if I don't know this basic stuff? And you start to question yourself. And it's really tricky. But we got through it. We also had issues with time zones because I was working with Zach on this project, and Zach and I are on exact opposite ends of the clock. We're 12 hours apart. So if I was working on something and I would find a bug and I would file a bug and throw it over the fence and then go to bed, and then he would pick it up and put in a fix and then punt it back to me, and then he would go to bed and then I'd pick it up, and there might still be another problem with it, or it would introduce another bug, and we'd go through these feedback loops. And it would get really, really frustrating. So the number of times I cursed Zach's name too many, I'm sorry, but we had some real frustrating times in there. And a project is never really done until you polish it. There's probably a big shout out to Ash JSON API for this one. This is probably the roughest of the Ash projects that we introduced into the app. It's a fine library. It did its job, but it was built for a very specific purpose. It had a lot of general stuff in there, but it wasn't as well tested and exercised. So when I came to test it and exercise it, I found a lot of issues. So the process of having the book inspire the framework came really early on. When I was doing the original writing sample way back in December 2023, it was for the very first chapter of the book. This is how we set up Ash. This is how we get started. And one of the things I realized was that the setup was really manual and tedious. You have to copy and paste things around the place. You had to change config, create files. It was really error prone and tedious. I'm like, can't we write some generators to automate some of this? So this is a message that I submitted in our Slack, December 2023. We need generators. Is there something we can do for this? And it turns out that, yes, there was something we could do for it. It turns out that Zach and James had already been working on this library called Igniter behind the scenes to generate code, to patch code, so that to create this really good like installation, setup, upgrade process. I'd like to claim some credit for that because I was really pushing for these generators, because the further we got through the book, the worse it got setup process. Like, I don't know if anyone saw the old setup process for Ash authentication. It was a mess. It worked, but it was really hard to get right. You had to copy and paste a lot of things in a lot of places. So the biggest challenge, some of the biggest challenges we had were around the testing story of Ash. Ash purposefully did not provide any guidance on how to write tests in apps. But users and Pragprog expected guidance, like we're writing these apps, how do we test them? So when I wrote the initial version of the Tunez app, I included some tests. I used libraries like Ex Machina to generate test data for the application, and then wrote tests around that. But Zach didn't want to use factory libraries like that. And we had some back and forth discussions about like the functionality that Ash provides, how to use it. He had a vision on how to write tests, but I couldn't really understand it. And I couldn't really write the chapter if I didn't really understand what I was writing about. So we decided that he would write the first version of this chapter, and then we would work on it together. So this is one of the factories that I wrote in my initial demo app. Because we're working with a music app, we have music, we have artists, which are like groups, bands, whatever. They release albums, albums have tracks. So this is an album factory. We create an album has an artist, a name, a year, a creator. This is kind of the kind of tests that we expected people to be familiar with when it came to writing tests. So when Zach gave me the first version of the chapter that he was writing, something like some of the code, it's like it would be okay if you wrote it in an app, like it wouldn't be great, but it would be okay. But we didn't want to give people code that was just okay, because people are going to use this as like best practices moving forward. They're going to copy and paste it. They're going to use it. We want it to be the best it can be. So this is what he gave me for a create album factory. It uses some generators to generate some random data because Ash provides Ash generator. Then we use the actions that are defined in our resources to generate this data and then return the data. And this works. It's not super great, but it works. So our next thought was, do we have to use these code interfaces in our factories? Ash generator is all about streams and generators and this. Can we build something stream-based for generating data? So our second version looked like this. It's a little bit better. We can pass in some opts. We use Ash generator's action input, which will look at an action and generate random data based on what that action accepts. Like if it accepts a string for an email field, it will generate you a random string. It puts the data in there and it has an option to call some after hooks based on what happens. It's a bit better. And this is how you would use it in a test. You would call factory.user and you could take 1, you could take 10 because it returns a string, or you could take 5 and then use that user to create artists, and it's a little bit better. So what if we add some syntactic sugar for the common parts? This is the same example as before. So we can sort of see what parts we want to pull out. We have the default values for different attributes. We have a call to our action. We're not using the code interface now. We're using action input with the name of the action. We have these overrides for the fields by go back. Thank you. We have some overrides for things like password confirmation, and then we have an after action that we want to do after we generate the data. Can we put some sort of abstraction around that to make it nicer to use? So the third version we wrote looked like this. So now instead of having a factory, we've really leaned into the generator idea. So we use Ash generator, and our user factory generator returns a stream that is built using this new change set generator function. So it will generate change sets for the specified action, which is register with password in this case. We provide the default arguments for the action. We can provide some overrides that come in from the test that's calling this factory. We can provide an after action that can do something after the factory is run. There's a few more options that we've added, but this is what we kind of ended up with. This is what is written in the book. This is what Mike demoed with his with his code earlier. This is what he demoed using change set generator. So this is sort of how the book has fed back into the development of the framework. A lot of this generator stuff already existed, like not much of it is new, but we've made it a lot nicer to use. We've added this layer of polish. So the framework is inspiring the book, and the book is then feeding back into the framework. We're still working out some kinks with this approach, but we've used it in apps since we introduced it, and it's working pretty well. And it feels pretty nice to use in tests, because we can use our generator now, and we have these nice functions called generate, which will generate one record. Or there's also generate many, which will generate many records, and we can pass in the factory or generator, which is a function, not an atom. It's an atom symbol, whichever one Elixir calls it, I never remember. And because this is a function, we get nice things like you can go to definition of the function, and you can easily map around your code, and it's a lot nicer to use, and it's very similar to what you would be used to if you were using a library like Ex Machina. It's very similar, and it feels pretty good to use in tests. So this is the biggest hurdle that we kind of overcame so far, but we got past it, and it's all good. Yay. But not everything is smooth sailing in the writing process. It can be a very lonely process at times, because no one is as invested in your book as you are. I've had this book sitting in the back of my brain for about 1.5 years now, and it's there all the time, pressuring me to work on it, to think about it, to talk about it. I wake up in the middle of the night with ideas about it. It's always on my mind. I always want to talk about it, but no one really cares as much as I do. I don't think even Zach cares as much as I do, which is, it is what it is. It's just a fact. And a lot of people will try to be really supportive, and they say they'll read your work, but they won't, and that's fine. People are really busy. Life is short. It will feel like a personal attack if someone tells you, yeah, I'm going to read it and give you a review, and they don't, but it's not personal. If they do read it, that's a bonus. If they offer you feedback, that's an absolute gift, and you should take it with both hands. But if they don't, that's fine. We've all done it. How many books do we all buy and then say we're going to read them, and then we don't? It's just a thing. And there's a fine line between building hype for a book and putting unnecessary pressure on yourself. We were encouraged to make the fact that we were writing a book public very early on. So when Ash 3.1 was released, which I think was in about April or May last year, that was when we made the announcement, we're writing a book more soon. And of course, as soon as you do that, then the questions start. When is it coming out? When can I read it? Can I read it now? How do I get it? And then that's all pressure on you to write faster so people can read it. And anytime I would post about it or tweet about it, or I'm not sure what you call it on Blue Sky about it, questions would arrive. When can we read it? When can we read it? And it's like, you want to take the time and you want to do it right, but you've got people who are really putting pressure on you. They don't mean to put pressure on you. They just want to read it because they're excited. And it can be really hard. Like, it's been really stressful. And people will try to pump you up. People will tell you you're doing a great job. You're doing an awesome thing that's going to be great for the community. But if you're stuck in a rut and you haven't been able to write anything for 2 weeks, it just makes everything feel worse. I don't have an answer for this. Like, people have the best intentions and they just want to see you do well. They want to see you succeed. And sometimes you just got to push through. You might not want to listen to what they have to say, but you have to try. It's hard. I get it. But it's not a death march. Like, there is a finish line. When you finish the book, like, it is the greatest feeling in the world. I'm not there yet. Soon I will be there. There's a finish line. You'll get there. And the end result is totally worth it. The feedback from the book has been absolutely incredible. Within days of the book coming out, I had dozens of messages from people saying it all makes sense now. Everything is so approachable. Like, I can see the value add of this framework. I can see what it does for me. Zach sort of has started the discussion with his story of a function talks. I don't know if you've seen some of those from conferences last year, But one thing we really struggled to do was nail down like an elevator pitch. How do we describe what Ash actually does? It's really hard to do because it does so many things. But I think now people are starting to get what it does and what it can do based on work like conference talks and this book. We've had a heap of new users come in on Discord, on Elixir Forum, in other places talking about the framework. Sometimes they want to help, sometimes they have bugs, sometimes they're coming in because their company has decided to use it and they don't know how to use it and they're like, I just want to do this. But we've had a lot of new people joining the community since the book came out, which has been great. We've also had a lot of potential clients that have come to Alembic because they've read the book and they're like, we can use this for our projects. This is awesome. We want to use this. Please help us use this, which is great. And it's also given me a lot of personal opportunities. You would not be hearing from me today if I had not written this book. Like, this is my first talk. You would not be hearing from me otherwise. I've been invited to go on podcasts. I've been invited to go to conferences. Like my personal, had a lot of opportunities that I would not have had if it wasn't for writing this book. So would I do it again? It's probably a bit early to say because we're not yet finished the process, but we're very close to the end of the process. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. There are already plans. Watch this space. And that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening to me. I've got some links here. There's the QR code. You can save 35% off the book. If you want to hear more from me, there's my blog. I'm on Blue Sky. You can follow me there. Watch Zach's Story of a Function talk via the Tunez app. Thank you.